Welcome back. Today I'm going to be unboxing, inspecting, and comparing LS carbureted aluminum intake manifolds. I went ahead and got each version, which this one over here is a single plane intake that I got off of eBay. I think I paid about $104 plus tax with free shipping, but I used a promo code at the time. And this one is a dual plane intake that I got off Amazon, which I paid $116 plus tax, free shipping, no promo code. Not sure if the prices are still the same, but I need to open up and inspect these before it's been the third day so I can, return either if there's an issue. So let's get started. I think we'll do the single plane first. Both seem to be packaged nice, although when I was hauling them out, it did appear that the dual plane felt heavier, and the box is actually a little taller. So otherwise, they're about the same size. Cut that again real quick. Typical very light packing. We just got this little foam layer on top. There's all the included accessories, hardware, O-rings, I guess you can call them, gaskets or whatever. Just basic packaging. Oh, and by the way, if you can't tell, this is a coated intake, which was a nice plus. I mean, most intakes were not, so I was happy to get this black coated intake. I'm not sure if it's paint, powder coat, or whatever, but time will tell. Okay, get to the dual plane. I'm glad that I remembered which box was which. Well, this one actually came in a box, which surprisingly has some damage here. You can see it's kind of protruding, so I think that was the only damage. Yeah, just that side. The other one was shipped just that box, which looks fine so far. But these intakes are lighter than your typical small block Chevy intake. There's more metal there. So we'll see. And when we get to actually checking them out and seeing how good they are. Come on. Oh, that's probably chalk on nails on a chalkboard, let's say. Alright, again, typical cheap packaging. Even smaller foam layer on top. And again, the stuff's stuffed in the plug. So, let me pull both these out. I'll look them over real quick. Set them on the table and we'll go ahead and check them out. Right here's that part of the intake that was, I guess protruded the box or whatever. You can see right here the bag's kind of like got a bit of a scuffing to it and an actual hole right there, which lines up with a little bit of a ding on the intake. Nothing that I'm really worried about because that's nowhere near the sealing surface. Just it might be raised, so it's something you would probably have to file down just to be safe. That way it doesn't have a high spot and doesn't seal. Alright, I looked them over quickly and I'm all set up, so let's begin. Both these intakes were advertised as comparable to a name brands intake, which this one over here, the 300-132 I believe, and this one the 300-130. You can look those up for yourself. They're manufactured in the same region that a major brand manufactures their intakes, and many components these days. So far, not so bad. I mean, see here, this is the hardware they came with. It's actually, I first I'm like, yeah, they're probably just the bag of the same stuff, but they're not. You can see right here the bolt differences. Single plane has both shorter. I mean, they both have two different length bolts, but single planes are each shorter and the dual planes are each taller. They of course have washers, and they have the O-ring gaskets and these plugs, which we only got one for the single plane, which we'll get to in a second, and two for the dual plane. The single plane, the machining looks pretty nice. I like the coating. Overall, it's a decent intake for what I paid. $100 intake. So, I mean, you can see over here, it's got these locating pads. They have that for just machining on the four corners of both intakes. And it's something you typically see that on a lot of stuff that's machined. There'll be like these locating pads and such, but these outer ones for this intake are also included in the injector bungs. You can see right here. So you got, 8 injector bungs if you want to, what's it called? Oh, it's not direct injection, port injection. So if you want to do a port injection and have a fuel rail, which that's also what these holes are for, to mount, I assume, to bolt your fuel rail down. So that's that's a plus for that intake, which on the dual plane we don't have any of that. Back to the single plane. Oh, and I believe this is the rear of both intakes, because we got the vacuum port there and the vacuum port there, which I like the vacuum port right here into the plenum, not into the runner, which on the dual plane, it's typically, on a lot of dual planes, you can see it going into a runner, which I don't like that approach, but I understand they gotta do what they gotta do. And also on the side over here is an additional one, which I'm not quite sure what that one's for, but it's there. And if you don't need to use it, there's a plug for it. So, as I was saying, the machining on the single plane, I like it. It's just, we've got nice shiny carb pad. Although there is this little bit of a defect on both sides where they switch direction whenever they're surfacing it, and you can feel it ever so lightly. It's annoying. Like, let me see if I can do this. You hear that? I'm not sure if the mic can pick that up over the lights and such, but over here, you don't hear that click. So you can hear that little step. It's not much. I mean, we're talking maybe like 1/1000th or so. I don't think it'll be a problem sealing for a carburetor. It's no big deal. I mean, I have other intakes that have had that same defect in the past, but I paid 3 times for those intakes, or over 3 times for those intakes, and you don't expect that flaw on an expensive name brand intake. I mean, it's just, but for a $100 intake, who cares? For the dual plane, not shiny. I mean, shiny, just a rough surface. You can hear how rough that is. But again, it's as long as it's flat, which I haven't checked yet. I gotta get my straight edges from inside. If it's flat, it's good enough. It's fine. I mean, it's nice to have shiny things, but for something like that, you don't really need it. I mean, this is not a cylinder head or a deck block. Yeah, I think that's it for the single plane. And for the dual plane, again, no injector bungs, which looks kind of funny having these big old ears on the ends of the runners without the bungs being there. just something I noticed. Overall, the dual plane is decent casting. I mean, there's a nice radius down here, which goes into that way. If you look. By the way, whenever you buy a brand new intake, you see that on my fingers? Wash them. Soap and water, wash them. I don't care if they're brand new, wash them. There's so much, these are castings, and there's going to be junk inside of them. So, any intake, even name brand, wash them. Keep that junk out of your engine. Now, there is a bit of a lip over here, which should be a radius. It's not, really. It's kind of a sharp lip. It's going to be, I can't really show it to you. I can only tell you about it. It's right here where it kind of opens up the plenum down there. Something I'd like to smooth out myself, but it's not terrible. I actually almost cut myself on that part of it. So overall, I mean, there's no deal killers. They're both, bump it into my chair. Overall, there's no deal killers. They're both pretty decent so far. I did dig out this small block Chevy intake just for comparison. Now this is a high rise, and this is advertised as a mid rise. Just for overall comparison, I wanted to show this real quick. Side by side. You see right there for yourself. I mean, these intakes are a lot smaller and lighter. And of course, they're both air gap design. That's just all else intakes of that air gap design, which makes them a cooler intake. And in my opinion, it takes a little more skill to tune a air gap design intake, which, that's just part of the learning curve for carburetors these days. Also, of course, I do want to point out too, another reason these intakes are cooler is because they don't have the heat crossover, which you say that's not even connected to the main section, the intake runners and plenum, but it makes a difference. I measure the front and rear carburetor bowls, and that makes a few degree difference. So that's one thing that else has a positive in my opinion. Bit of a negative for tuning, but that's why overall I would recommend for someone who's less skilled the dual plane. That's going to make it easier to tune your carburetor LS in my opinion. Whereas someone who has more skill and knows how to, you know, set up a combo, knows what they're doing, they can definitely utilize a single plane on the street. Well, not most people, some people. Anyways, oh yeah, before I forget this, get that out of my way. I did notice here, comparing the plenums, see if we can show this here on camera. The dual plane, which is hard, it's hard to tell because of the glare. The dual plane is at an angle, whereas the single plane is flat. So dual plane, slightly at an angle, a few degrees, not in extremes I'm pointing out, but just like, I don't know, 5 degrees or something like that, maybe 10. I'm not a degree expert, but it is slanted down, which is another nicer feature for a carburetor intake because you're not. It's for your bowls and such. But for more race area intake, you're not really worried about that. I mean, it depends on the overall rake of the vehicle and other factors, you know, setting of the engine and such. But just something I noticed, and also why I noticed that. Yeah, it's hard to tell, really hard to tell because the camera. Yeah, I'll do it this way. Let's do this. Okay. Try not to move my fingers. You see that? Not exactly the most scientific way of measuring, but the dual plane carburetor pad is more forward. So if you're going to have problems with your cowl and such, which I have a 4th Gen F body, which is out there, and I have a little bit of a tight fit on the cowl. The carburetor is going to be more into the firewall cowl with the single plane. This is we said farther back because this is the rears of the intakes. These are the rears, and these are the fronts. So the dual plane, forward and slanted. There's something interesting. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a super game changer for, you know, either intake. But, and oh, of course, a height comparison. You can see right there, the dual plane appears to be taller. So, another factor, I would say, ½ inch, 3/4 inch, maybe 3/4 inch, about 3/4 inch taller. But you can't make a true comparison usually, especially with small block Chevy intakes, until it's on the engine. Although I think with these, because of how they are, you know, there's nothing, no valley, nothing. I think if there is a little bit of difference because of the lower casting, it's not much. This is going to still be the taller intake, even if it's a 1/4 inch. It's still going to be taller on the actual engine than the single plane. Well, let me flip these over real quick, and we'll go over a few more of the machining and such. Okay, I flipped them both over, and right away it's actually more noticeable seeing the difference in the intake, how it's slanted, which by the way, I flipped the dual plane around because it was just going to be easier to show you from that angle. You can see right there, slanted intake. As I said, I want to put the front this way because it's going to be easier because I don't want to be working with slanted it away from me. Anyways, right away, again, the machining. Nice shiny, dull, and rough. Well, not too rough, but it's good enough. I mean, if you're sitting on the O-rings, it's not a big deal, I guess. I mean, it is what it is. You don't need a high polish surface, even if you weren't using O-rings. But it is nice to have start off with a good machine surface, because later you're probably going to clean up yourself. Well, actually, typically there's no sealing in this intake, so never mind. But you can see right away, this is why the dual plane is probably most definitely heavier. Maybe I'll weigh them here. I can weigh them easily on the carb pads, you know. Maybe later I will. But you can see right here, this is all the extra material compared to this much, you know, simpler design. You know, plus it's shorter, the single plane. Although with this, you know, single plane, the runner lengths are definitely not even. You got the short inner runners and the really long outer runners, which, you know, I'm not a fan of that. But I mean, you run into that in any single plane, but it's more pronounced than the LS. It's, you know, definitely more pronounced. But they're, you know, the overall casting is both decent. Although, yeah, this one right here, there's these odd like jogs or steps. It's gonna be hard to see on camera. Get the right lighting here. Right there. Does I see that like jog or step right there? This both of these outer runners, which is there's this weird lip here too. So I don't know if it's because of that lip. Well, it's not on the inside. The runner right there, and it has a lip there. So I don't know why it's like that. I don't like it. But there is some oddities on this one as well. I don't know how it will compare to a name brand. Where is it? You can see it kind of like the weird angles in there. Not ideal. And also, I want to point out too, while I'm thinking of it, unlike most typical single plane intakes, which are really easy to port, this LS, you're not going to get in these long runners very easy. I mean, it's just, you look in there, yeah. In runners, you can port them, but not that you would need to. I mean, they're already short enough and probably flow good enough compared to the longer ones. So you can't really get where you need to, but it's a cheap intake. Whatever. And if you want to have a higher flowing single plane, you can. There are better versions, I believe, for the LS. Although carburetor intakes are not as typical with LSs versus the EFI options. But these are not bad for cheap intakes. Port alignment, none of them seem to be really high or low, but the overall shape is a little iffy. I mean, I'm no LS expert. I mean, I don't know a lot of typical LS stuff, so I can't be 100% on that, but the whole actual head to port alignment could be off. It's just, you can see how the O-ring is so far away from the port. It's just, you can't tell by looking at the intake. I mean, it's just, and of course, like I said, the angles of some of them at the top and bottom, they're just not ideal for, you know, I guess, you know, these are supposed to be for, both of these intakes are supposed to be for cathedral port heads, which I assume the injector bung is going to be up here. I mean, it's going to be up there. The injector bungs are up here, so I assume this will be there will be a notch on the heads, but you're not really, you know, using injector bungs unless you machine these out. Then you'd have to grind those out, and that's a whole nother subject. Anyways, with the O-rings, you can't really gasket match or anything, which is why I got this over here. I don't know if many people know this, but Felpro, you see the part number right there, makes paper, old style, intake manifold gaskets for the LS. It's right there, cathedral port. Which, just by looking at this intake, which is of course upside down compared to the actual port, is much bigger. So, I wish I had some heads right here right now, but I don't. I don't really want to tear apart my engine for this video. I got another engine, of course, in the car, which I'll get to later. So maybe I'll make a video about that later. We'll see, you know. But let me pull one of these gaskets out and we'll lay it on there just so we can see. There we go. Got one out. Kind of floppy, but normally they're a little thicker for Velcro. Man, it's just, yeah. Oh, I want to point this out too before I forget. This is what I typically like to use my paper gaskets. See the part number right there, if it'll focus. Some good stuff, but it makes cleanup for the flange much more of a pain in the butt. But it seals. Yeah, so we got the gasket right here. our floppy gasket. It'd be nice if it was a little stiffer. I'm not sure if they have thicker ones. A lot of times Velcro will have a thinner and thicker version, so I gotta have to look that up. But this is what I got. And again, these intakes are being upside down on the port right here. Let's see what we got here. Just a rough guide based on the outer holes. Wait a minute. Why aren't the other holes lining up? Oh, I got the wrong one. Let's go to the other side. No, I just got to flip it. They line up. Yeah, now they line up. Yeah, don't mind me. So, right there. Just a rough guide. Ooh, looks a little, right there, a little close. Overall, port alignment, not bad. Let's check this one over here right quick. A little close to the outside there. You know, according to the gasket, the port alignment is, you know, not ideal, but could be worse. I mean, I've seen where they're like, you know, they're off the gasket, and I mean, even if it's off the gasket, it would work. But I mean, if you want a port match, which again, I'm not going to show that in this video. It's something I might make later on. Yeah, right there. See, that's pretty close in that corner. But generally, you know, good. I mean, you got the, you know, right here, you got the notch for the injector. And we'll check this one. Yeah, I'm gonna, no, right here, actually, right there. See, that's, yeah, those two are not ideal, but, I mean, it just depends on where you place the gasket. Because you can move this gasket around, the holes are big enough, it's not really, that's, you know, that's a finishing touch you'd have to do, you know, figure out for yourself, and actually use this, you know, to glue it to the head where you want it, and then set the intake where you want it. But, you know, without the actual engine mocking it up, this is just a rough example. See if the ports are good enough, and they are good enough. I mean, they're not, I've seen much worse. Overall, the casting inside, both of them, is not terrible. You have your typical, lighting, you know, casting dots. Oh, come on, lighting. You know what? I'm gonna grab a flashlight. But before I do that, I'm gonna grab when I do that, I'm gonna grab my scale, my straight edges, because we still gotta do a few more checks, and then we'll wrap this up. Single plane is 10 pounds, 10 ounces, 0.1. And the dual plane is 12 pounds, 13 ounces. So there you go. I was right. The dual plane is heavier. It felt heavier. It even felt heavier in the box. So, I mean, it's 2 pounds. Yeah, no big deal. Oh, and if my house burns down, you better like this video, because I had to steal the 9-volt out of my smoke alarm. So, there you go. Well, the flanges on the flange surfaces are flat enough on both intakes. I mean, I checked them, you know, straight across on both intakes, and of course diagonally on all, you know, each side of each intake. And this one, there was a little bit of a, like when you go at the angle, which I'm trying not to bang this around, you can see that, yeah, there was a little bit of, it's really hard to see, but just the tiniest gap on the outer edge in one of them. So nothing I'm worried about. I mean, they're great. I mean, there's nothing that's, you know, like there's not like they're not low in the center or high in the center. As long as your head's intake flange surfaces are straight and flat, these intakes will seal. But again, I plan to use this Velcro gasket, so it's less of an issue for, you know, depending on what you want to use. If you use the O-rings, there might not be as much comfort zone, I want to say, I think. So, I mean, looking good there. Let me flip them over and we'll check the carburetor pad with my smaller straight edge. Oh, and I do want to point out, there are, you know, little defects here and there in the flanges, but nothing I'm worried about. There's nothing, no big gouges or anything that's going to, I think, going to be, you know, anywhere. I mean, there's already, actually, there is very deep gouges for these O-rings. So, I mean, whether I put some RTV in there or, you know, the O-ring and the gasket, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I just checked both carb pads with my Starrett straight edge. See the part number right there. Which, would you look at that? It's a good thing I got it out. I'm gonna have to oil these both up. And I'll get that little bit of rust off. It's not where I would use the straight edge anyway. We're good on the checking surface, but still, these things are not cheap. But anyways, show you here real quick. I went ahead and checked them both. You know, diagonal, straight across. You know, multiple angles, and they both look great. There's a little bit of shadow there, but they're good. They're flat enough. I did forget to point out earlier. There's this little bit of defect, which is, you know, you can see right there. Get the right lighting. Yeah, see, it hides right there in the shadow. There's that little defect, which I'm not concerned about that. I mean, there's nothing on either of these intakes that I would complain to the, you know, return them or complain to the merchant about. So, I mean, I'm happy with them so far. Well, I'm done checking. I'm happy with them. But over here, you know, we got this. You can feel that. You know, you definitely 100% feel that. But when you put the straight edge on there, she looks good. I mean, for a carburetor, you know, for the gasket, which by the way, I like the thicker gasket. I believe this is Demon brand gasket. I like them because they're a little thicker and they're a little more forgiving. You get some brands and they're pretty thin. But, you know, this is like, I think this is a 10 pack I got on Summit. I like these ones. But everything looks good. I mean, I check out. Although this flange is a little narrower than I would like, and for 99.9% of people, that would not be an issue. But some people, I mean, if you know, you know. The flange is not quite as thick as I would like it to be. Anyways, flanges both check out good. You know, surfaces overall good enough for 2 cheap intakes. So, next, of course, is the threads, which I just screwed the plugs that they supplied in, which they screw in fine. There's not many threads on these intakes. Oh, I do want to point this out. Grab one of these right here. On this dual plane, the one side is plenty deep, but the other side is pretty shallow. So, I mean, if you're going to use, it's not even threaded that deep either. You only got like barely any thread. So, if you're going to use a carburetor lift plate, be careful on these dual planes. The single planes, the holes are straight through. So, I mean, you got all the threads on all 4 holes. You're good to go there. For the dual plane, you don't got a lot of thread on the one side. So just something, you know, to note. And I checked all the threads. You know, there's only 4 threads on those, you know, bolt threads. And then, of course, the 4 pad threads and the injector rail threads, which are all standard. They're all checked standard. So they're my standard bolt. I did try a metric bolt in them and they did not go. So those bolt holes for the rails and the pad, of course, you know, are standard. And they all check out good. So both intakes passed my inspections. We're good to go there. Yeah, let me look at my notes real quick. We'll wrap this up. Oh, I didn't grab my flashlight. Well, let me just show you real quick. Now there's decent enough light. We get the right angle. There is some casting junk, you know, in the runners. I mean, they're typical, you know, not, you know, 100%. And you got your little junk here and there, which you could clean up, and it's no big deal. Again, for the dual plane, probably a little more cleanup involved, which is going to be more difficult to get in there because it's not as open, but they're cheap intakes. They're good enough. Well, let me check my notes and we'll wrap this up. Yeah, I don't think I can fit any more intakes on this table. Anyways, I dug out 2 more intakes because there's something I want to point out on the dual plane, the LS dual plane, that I forgot to mention earlier, and I want to clarify some more on the carburetor patch, which we'll get to that here in a second. But first, let's Let me show you that real quick. Now, I noticed this in the pictures of the ad for the dual plane on eBay and Amazon when I was shopping for this intake. And what I noticed is it doesn't have your common pattern on the floor right here that you see typically on most dual planes these days. And it's not always this exact pattern. It'll be some kind of like a cross hatch pattern. But the point of the pattern is for when you accelerate or brake hard to keep the fuel from running, down the ports and I guess causing a rich situation or whatever. It's for more even fuel distribution. Whereas the LS intake, I noticed on some of the aftermarket ones, it has that pattern, the name brand, but these generic ones do not have that pattern. So it's something that you have a carbide, you want to get in there and probably add yourself. Nothing super fancy. You don't want to dig out a bunch. Just some grip for the fuel to hold, so it doesn't runs or sloshes one way or the other. But just something I noticed that I want to point out for if you're considering the generic cheaper eBay or Amazon dual plane. Now the other thing I want to clarify and revisit is the carburetor pads. I know it's well known that small block Chevy, at least the dual plane is more common, the carburetor pad is angled down some. Usually, whereas the single plane will be more flatter. This is not the greatest example. This is more of a lower, I guess, street single plane, and it has an angle as well. So, not the most best example, but and I do want to point out too that I line these intakes the best I can, but you'll see over here, well, that's not lined up. That in the V8, each bank, the one bank is staggered, so they're lined up as best I can for even the LS, which is a bit harder to see. But again, when we look at all the carburetor pads, that LS single plane is set back, whereas a small block Chevy single plane is not set back. So that's what I really find more interesting, the setback. The angle I'm used to, but not all single planes are the same. Here, let me show you here real quick. This is not the best example. I have some other new ones, but they're too buried. I didn't want to take them out, so this is have to do. And this is a Vortec intake pattern, so you can claim it's not lining up well because it's a totally different intake pattern. There's no center bolts. So I just wanted to get something that was the same 12-bolt pattern, just to be whatever. But when you look at this carburetor pad, no angle, but it's not set back. So just something I found interesting. I'd like to point out, clarify more. So I don't know of any other engine, single planes that the carburetor pad is set back, a good, 3/4, ½ inch or more. But there it is. Before we wrap things up, I do want to point out one more thing about the dual plane. Something I forgot to point out earlier, which is on some models of these dual plane intakes, you can mount the ignition box on the actual intake, which I would never want to do that in the first place because the intake's going to be hotter, or even the engine bay is going to be hotter than somewhere else I'd like to mount the box. But that's just me. But if you do have an intake that style like that, which while this dual plane may be styled similarly, every intake you get from Amazon or eBay may not be cast or machined exactly the same as these two intakes, or as the ones they're supposed to be modeled after. So just keep an eye out for, if they have the provisions to mount the ignition box, there's actually a hole, I believe, in the runner someplace that's straight through. So if you do not do that, you have to seal that hole. It says right so in the MSD instructions, but it's probably not going to say on your intake, because I didn't get any instructions with these. So just something to look out for. I mean, Also, again, you know, put your plug-in on the side here. Don't forget that. This one will be a little harder because you're probably using for your brake booster, but you know, vacuum leaks are no good. Anyways, I'm happy with both intakes. I mean, the price of both these intakes was less than one name brand intake, and they're manufactured in the same region, so I'm good. The reason I got, which I just bumped something on my camera. I always do that. I hate that. Stop. There we go. The reason I got both intakes is because it's easy to swap intakes for an LS. Much easier than for a small block Chevy. You know, there's no coolant, water, you're not dealing with anything wet. Well, you shouldn't be doing anything wet other than a little bit of fuel. But, I mean, they're lighter, it's simple. So, for me, I want to try both intakes. I typically, most of the time, would recommend dual plane. If you have low or no experience tuning a carburetor, 100% get yourself a dual plane. It's going to be, you know, way easier. Do not put an open spacer on it. Do not put an open spacer. This is a gasket. I'm saying, for example, do not put an open spacer on it because that'll make it harder to tune. You want to keep this divider right here, you know, separated. Get out of there. You want to keep it separated to make things easier to tune wise, because that's the whole benefit of the dual plane or 180 degree intake, is it's dividing things up and making it, you know, more torque, you know, broader power band versus your single plane. Whereas this is typically a smaller single plane, so you're going to have more mid-range with the single plane than something like a larger, you know, taller, you know, bigger plenum. But the plenum is decent enough size. I mean, that's a nice size plenum. Now, you know, I got big fists. So, but if you're going to go with a throttle body injection, you know, all those like things like FI Tech, Sniper, and so on, this is the intake I would go with. I mean, there is that little bit of difference where, you know, the carburetor, you know, the whatever you put on there is going to be more forward and angled on the dual plane. But in my opinion, throttle body, single plane, carburetor, dual plane. Single plane if you're advanced, you know, tuner, you know, or moderate, you know, you got experience doing it, you know what you're doing. But there's that. Again, I'm more than happy with the intakes. No complaints. I don't have to deal with the whole hassle of contacting this person and messaging back and forth. We're good. So, I hope you found this interesting, useful. I thought it was interesting to find that carburetor pad difference. But they're pretty simple, and that's why I thought, you know, it'd be nice to compare them in one video, not break it up into multiple videos. But if I got multiple videos of other intakes for, you know, older Gen 1 small block Chevy, and if you've seen some of those, you know it's not always going smoothly. So if you get a chance, check those out. I got more LS content coming up. I'm new to the LS platform, so I'll be learning and showing some things, and I got some ideas already. You know, where is it? I'm just putting it in. I got a new 5.3 possibly there that I'm going to be prepping and putting in my new 4th Gen F body I just got. So I got videos planned. Stay tuned, check them out. Thanks for watching. You know, leave me a comment or like if you found this interesting. Appreciate it. Keep it real.